Good morning, world changers. It's Suzy Beaumont here, and it's day 3 of creating your personal development plan to self-actualization. With me is transformation coach Murtha, and today we are looking at level 3 of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the development model which outlines the 5 basic principles to becoming our true, authentic, congruent self. Now, the third need in Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the need for love, belonging, and connection, i.e., the need for friendships, intimacy, family, and a sense of connection. So, we've explored the first 2 levels, and which have been more about practical needs and our environment. But today it's all about the people in our lives and how we relate to them. But they do still play a key role in creating our environment for growth, don't they?
I think this is our, me and you were talking about this before we jumped on. I think this is one of my favorite ones because this was Maslow's third level of 5. So it's right in the center, it's right in the heart of the whole pyramid hierarchy of needs. And rightly so, because, we've got love in there, we've got a sense of belonging, belonging is a big word that I've noticed coming up the last few years in corporates when we've been working in companies. So when we're coaching people, they need meaning, they need purpose, they need connection, they need belonging. Now, if me and you would have walked into a job 10, 20 years ago, Susie, and start espousing that we need, we need a sense of belonging and connection and, purpose and
I know
passion in
what
our
my boss
job.
would have told me.
Well, it would have been the same for most of us. So this is how much we've changed as a society. This is well before diversity and inclusion and everything else that's rightly coming in. But I think these things are now, people are so driven to make sure that they've got good connection, belonging, meaning, purpose, and passion in their jobs that if they haven't got it in that job, and even if it pays well, people will, and they're showing that they will leave a job to
Mm,
go for somewhere where they do feel more valued, they do feel more connected to the job, to its principles, to the ethics, to basically the culture.
yeah,
So we mustn't underplay this bit of people because, people in our environment, it's all about relationships, isn't it?
yeah,
Relationship to ourselves, that's
yeah.
personal development, relationship to other people, and then relationship beyond the bigger picture, what they call transpersonal. Now we know there's great kind of teachers and professors out there. Steve Taylor would be one that I would come straight to
Mm,
with transpersonal psychology. But I believe before we can start getting a good connection with other people, it's the middle one, and transpersonal, which is to be basically means to go beyond, to find a connection with nature, the cosmos, the rest of it. The first number one relationship we've got to get right is the relationship to ourself.
mm,
And I think we don't spend anywhere near enough time. We always talk about relationships as if like, oh, relationship means with other people. Well, no, number one before that comes to the relationship to ourselves. So, when we know ourselves, when we know what we stand for, what we won't tolerate, when we know what our strengths are, when we know what matters to us, what we care about, then we can start putting boundaries in place. Because as we know with relationships, the number one thing we have to start with, I mean, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't even heard the term. I don't know about you, Susie,
no,
boundaries.
no,
And
absolutely.
yet
Yeah.
you won't go through many conversations now in a workplace or in a relationship where boundaries doesn't at some time come into it.
I completely agree that boundaries do and should come into it, but I do think this is an area that probably is why relationships can have conflict and have challenge because the boundaries aren't there, because the personal development hasn't done. I mean, what you were saying there is like it's really coming back again to those solid foundations. So
Mm.
we've talked about level 1, level 2, but again, building solid foundations in our relationship with ourselves. So, like you've said, knowing who you are, what your values are, what's important to
Mm.
you, what are you willing to do, what are you willing not to do, and what happens when somebody crosses those values. those priorities in your life, because that's when we sacrifice our boundaries. We either, because we want to people please, we're fear of other people's opinions, fear of getting sacked, fear of speaking out. We don't state those boundaries. And then that's when we start sabotaging ourselves. We start feeling resentful towards the other person because we've gone against our own intuition, our own values, our own meaning, our own purpose. And we've gone against that. And our soul feels it, our body feels it, our mind feels it, our heart feels it. And we're just kind of going, and then that's when you become angry, resentful, project it over somebody else, blame somebody else for the way you're feeling. And it's because often we've gone against our true values and our true north, because essentially we're trying to please, we're trying to fit in, we're trying to belong, because it's vital to our needs. We need to not be the outcast in the group. And I think, we're all tribal beings, that we need to belong to something. And this is what Maslow is talking about here. And I mean, this is something that you and your wife Jane talk about as well, the disease to please, isn't it?
Disease to please is really important because, however we've grown up, we've grown up with the consequences, I call it, of previous generations, which are often different to our generation.
Yeah.
We could have grown up with, like Jane, my wife, Catholicism, which has got a lot to answer to. You might have been grown up with a parent that was very military minded or very authoritarian, which is where we've come from. Don't forget the whole breakout from the 50s and the 1960s was people breaking away from that conservative kind of, blue collar, wear a suit kind of, the whole thing about the 60s was revolution, wasn't it? And breaking out. And I think there's a form of that going on now, because people are realizing that they will get sick if they don't honor their true emotions, and they spend their life people pleasing. And if they spend their life in FOPO, which is fear of other people's opinions, which is rife on social media, by the way, if we spend our time with the disease,
rife everywhere, not just social media, in our families, in our workplaces, everywhere.
It shows up everywhere. Social media is the most visual on a big scale. And we have to kind of sometimes realize that not everybody has got our back or our best interests. If you're living with a narcissistic partner, they haven't got your best interests in mind to make the relationship work.
In mind.
They've got their own needs. And so, what are you tolerating? I keep coming back to this word tolerate. Are you people pleasing, which is affecting your inner peace? Because if you are tolerating certain things, it wouldn't be bad. You talked about the really important word congruence. I'd not heard of it several years ago, but I'm using it more and more now. I mean, what does it mean? It basically means aligning what you think, what you feel, what you stand for, what your values are, what you say, with how you actually show up in the world. So it's aligning.
Being in line with all that.
It's being in line. Now, it wouldn't be too bad if you just go against that. That would be bad enough. But what us British do even worse than that is that doesn't work for us. We're not aligning, one with the other. But what is worse for the British, and we're known throughout the world for this, all those resentment feelings and irritation we push down in our emotions. So, it would be bad enough if we wasn't living to our standards and showing up for our values and worth in the world. That would be bad enough anyway, and it is. But on top of that, all the emotions around people pleasing and putting other people first and fearing other people's opinions so we can't stand up for our truth, it's the emotions that we push down in the ground that also make us suffer.
And that's the thing, our bodies are like alarms. These feelings that we feel are there designed to get our attention, because it's trying to say to you and educate you, something you are doing is not right. It's not serving you. This is out of alignment with your values. Now, if you've not done your personal development to work out what your core values are, then you won't understand this, and you won't understand why you feel the way you do. You'll just know that you're feeling
out of sorts.
Out of sorts. I was going to use a more expressive phrase, but you feel pissed off, you'll feel angry, you'll feel annoyed, you'll feel resentful, you'll feel jealous, all these kind of negative emotions. But if you're feeling those emotions, it's a signal to say something needs to change, something needs address, something needs your attention. And that's what we're doing. And I mean, I've been doing my psychotherapy course for the last 18 months, and this is a big part of it. Boundaries, because we have to do it in our contracting with our client. You have to do all your boundaries from the start. And this has been a real learning curve for me over the last years, and realizing, wow, I've got a serious lack of boundaries in a lot of my relationships. And I've been actively working on it. And some relationships have worked through that conflict, and I've put those boundaries in place, and we've been able to have these really kind of adult conversations. And I've joked with some of my friends and going, wow, look at us finally adulting for the first time in our lives.
In
But
their
it's
30s.
really, yeah, it's really strengthened our relationships and our friendships. But other relationships have been starting to fall by the wayside because they
Mm.
didn't like me putting in these boundaries, because I was changing and I was going, I'm no longer prepared to tolerate that. And this is the real challenge of this level when you start applying this and you start applying boundaries, because often, because you are changing and people are they've got to adjust with you. And there has to be an acceptance that some people will come with you, and some relationships and friendships and colleagues will fall by the wayside.
I mean, it's really interesting what you say about boundaries, Susie, because, the constant thing we have a problem with, an issue that comes up in coaching clients situations, is that, if you don't know your boundaries, and number
Is
two,
anyone else going to know them?
express them then, and
Mm.
articulate them to others, how do you even know when someone is stamping all over your ground?
Yeah.
So, you can't, if you don't ever put boundaries up of what is acceptable and not acceptable behavior, if you don't know it and then communicate that to others, how on earth, every time someone abuses your trust or stamps over your ground or puts you down or makes you feel bad because you're not people pleasing to them, how on earth can you kick back if you don't even know where your boundaries are?
Yeah.
So the first thing with the journal practice is, with boundary work, is to really start, the number one thing is to start, where are you saying yes too often?
Mm.
You need to start saying no. That in itself is a massive exercise and project that you can go out and do for yourself. Where are you too often saying yes, whether it's people pleasing, FOPO, tolerating, where are you too often saying yes when you really mean no? And every time you say yes to them, you're saying no to you and
Yeah.
pushing down those negative emotions. So,
And pushing
if you,
away what you want, actually, you
and
know,
what you need, and
of
what you
what you
need.
need. Yeah, your basic needs. Yeah, we're talking
And I
about your
really,
needs to absolute self-actualization here. Yeah.
and I really got it. I really connected with when you said that some friendships and relationships are moving closer to you and you will get deeper, but others have kind of gone past their sell-by date because
Mm.
that person's no longer ready to have a relationship with the new version of you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message we want to put out here, is that personal development and growth and feeling better about yourself has consequences.
Yes.
And one of the consequences is that not everybody is going to be for you going forward, and you're not going to be for everyone else, relationship wise. And you
And
have to pay attention to that.
yeah, and that is really challenging, because I knew, I keep saying, when I started working with Alistair and life coaching, that I knew by some of the conversations we were having that some relationships were going to fall away, because I couldn't deny it anymore.
Mm.
As I would, like, I knew it already inside of me, but I was starting to voice it. And once I voiced it out aloud to somebody else, I couldn't lie to myself anymore.
Mm.
Whilst it was still inside me, I was able to lie, deny it, distract, go la la la, it's not happening. But once I'd voiced it, Uh, it was undeniable, and I knew what I had to do. And that was so uncomfortable. And I really do want to express that to our listeners and our members that are hearing this, because with change, it is uncomfortable. It is difficult because you are going to have to say goodbye to certain things, certain people, certain areas of your life. And even if they're not serving you, there's going to be a whole level of chaos and discomfort and unease and upset around that. And if you are a people pleaser like I was, the last thing you want to do is upset somebody else, which may appear, because you're going through your growth, so you're supporting your own needs. A
Yeah,
people pleaser will sacrifice their own needs to accommodate everybody else. So this is a massive thing and a hurdle, an obstacle to get over and say, my needs are important. It's
true.
okay for me to
Mm.
put my needs first and make them a priority. And it is not my responsibility to for how somebody else feels about me putting my needs first.
Yeah,
But
yeah. As long as you're acting with due diligence,
mm,
respect for the other person,
yeah.
respect as in we can now be two different people. And I'll give you an example. I had a client the other week, and they've given up going out late, partying with their best friend. They've
Yeah.
given up drink and they've given up smoking, and all they are getting off their best friend of 20 odd years is constant they're derided, they're kind of
Mm,
criticized, they're boring. I don't know what's got into you. They need to change their life because of cancer and kind of illness, and mental health and spiritual health and
mm,
emotional health problems. They're wanting to change their world and needing to do it for their own survival. And
yeah.
yet their so-called best friend of 20 years is kind of,
It's not supporting them.
laughing at them and kind of calling them boring. That is clearly a relationship that's either going to have to very quickly change,
Yeah.
and they're going to have to kind of wake up the other person to, look, I'm going to be supportive here, or they're going to have to leave the equation
Yeah.
because they are not going to serve my client's
Yeah.
journey that is necessary to survive.
I mean, I would say that's all the signs of a toxic relationship. That's
Yeah,
somebody else's thinking about their own needs
yeah,
and what they're losing because that person is no longer playing a certain role in their life. And it's not
yeah,
actually, a true friendship by looking at the friend and going, oh my God, you've had these health scares. Of course, I get it. I understand it. That's what a true friendship. What can I do to help?
yeah.
How can I support you in this? Let me give up drinking as well. Let's do it together. That
Accountability
would be a
partner. Yeah,
sign of a true buddy,
yeah.
and a true friendship. And this is the painful thing when you reach that point and think, wow, it's 20 years of friendship that we've had. What the hell was it? Because it's not been friendship. It's been me playing a role or them playing a role, because you might be the toxic one for whatever reason, and just kind of going, wow, this was never on a level playing field. It was never equal. It was never in balance. It was always out of balance. And that is a really uncomfortable truth to face because you realize, well, it makes you question everything, and you realize what is my what what's that? What's all my other relationships based on if that one was so faulty and flawed? What mistakes and what role have I been playing in other relationships that have allowed
It's sobering. I think it's sobering. It's a wake
sobering?
up
Yeah,
call.
yeah,
And as a friend of mine, Paul said about significant friendships. Relationships usually come into our life for a reason, a
yeah,
season, or life. Most of us
exactly.
have heard that before.
Yeah,
Very few of our, we could probably count on one hand the true friends that are going to probably see us right through our lives,
yeah,
or less, one hand or less.
yeah,
That's a hard thing to accept,
yeah,
especially if you're in your 20s or younger. But actually, by the time you reach your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you start to realize, oh, yeah, that was true. Because the chance of someone growing with you,
mm,
around you, and like two railway tracks going up together are very, very seldom.
yeah, yeah. And that's it, because we do have so many different experiences in life, and they do take us in uh, different directions and what have you. But it really does take that self-awareness to keep you on the parallel tracks, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, you can have all these different experiences, but you can still grow together, but both people need to be doing the work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and it doesn't often always like that. And we often, and I mean, I used to joke with Alistair, I used to call him the divorce coach because he often worked with clients and they would end up, you know, the relationships would break down. And this, again, this is a challenge why maybe a lot of people don't start a personal development practice or don't start counseling or therapy or coaching because they know inside themselves that they are going to be forced to address this elephant in the room. And they know that that might mean moving house, that might changing jobs, that might mean impacting your finances. So all of a sudden, you know, we've got this dynamic where it's one area of your need on the hierarchy of needs, but yet it ripples out into all the other areas as well and affecting your psychological safety, your personal safety, you know, your environmental safety, all of these things. So again, and we touched on this in day one, where you get to this middle ground where things are uncomfortable, but they're okay. It's not that bad. So I'll just suck it up and I'll carry it on and I'll just, you know, maybe when the kids are older, I'll deal with it then. Maybe when the kids have gone to uni, or maybe when I've got this job, or maybe when the mortgage is paid off. I mean, you know, I mean, I've had I've got one particular friend. I remember she was just in the most toxic, miserable relationship. And she acknowledged that. She didn't try to hide it. But and she said, "Oh, I will leave him. I'll leave when the mortgage is paid off." And I was like, "When's the mortgage going to be paid off?" "Oh, another 10 years." Just like, oh my
Oh,
God. It's like you you could be dead by then, you know, like another 10 years of this utter misery. Like, what is that going to do to your physical, mental, and spiritual health? Why would you do that?
well,
If you
misery kills, doesn't it? We know because the body keeps a score. Misery
Mm,
kills.
yeah, yeah, it does, it reoccurs. So, you know, if we when we're looking at this scenario of love, connection, belonging, I mean, and it does filter out into all aspects. We're talking about our work colleagues, we're talking about family members, we're talking about our most intimate relationships, we're talking about our friendships. How do we cultivate healthy, empowering, nourishing relationships that do have the boundaries in place, that are supportive, that, you know, the people are in balance, that are equal, you know, all these core qualities that we need for these relationships?
I mean, a good
Well,
starting place, like we talked about at the beginning, is that first of all, you've got to start with yourself. It's
yeah.
the relationship you have to yourself. Now, you know, one of the big things in relationships is emotions. You know, emotions, as we know, are the secret to life. You know, we don't learn about emotions through school, college, university, unless you're doing a specialist course, and then it will only be in bit parts. But actually, one of the biggest things that's shameful about the education system is that we're not taught about energy and emotions and how to deal with our thinking. Not
Mm,
at all, which is
mm.
almost a crime. Whether that's intentional or not, that's another question, because it's easier to control people who and make them do things if
Absolutely. Well, yeah,
they
exactly.
can't think for themselves, can't feel for their own selves. Don't forget, we've got media systems and fear-based systems that are purposely built around pulling your strings, which are
Mm,
emotions. Because if you're in fear, anxiety, and trepidation, you can't think about the bigger things in life. So, you know, that's a whole other area which we won't go into today. But, you know, emotions, the first thing to start with is where, you know, again, come back to your journal. Where are you expressing or not expressing? That's the big one, underline, not expressing all of your core emotions. Because if there are certain emotions that you're not expressing, emotions are mostly your truth brought
mm,
out in a physical form. So you might not know what's going on in the depths of your shadow, you know, your unconscious, all the rest of it. Your dreams will normally bring that out in some element or not, or insomnia will bring that out if something's not going right for you in your emotions. But the big one is, where do you constantly feel that you're not listened to, that you're not heard, that you're not understood? And particularly, where are you feeling that in your relationship or your environment or at work? Where are you feeling that you're not being able to express your true emotions?
Yeah.
That should be an indicator. I've always said that emotions are signals. They are a barometer of what's really going on under the surface. Because you might have a feeling in the body, but you don't quite understand it. But if you go into that emotion will give you most of the data and the information you
Yeah.
need.
And I think that's important as well, because relationships, I believe, are our absolute biggest teacher. You know, we can have all these different experiences and challenges and things that, you know, happen to us in life, successes and what have you. But being in relationship with somebody, they hold a mirror up
I
to
was going
your
to say
own
that.
thing, your own
Yeah.
stuff, your wounds, and you know, I know me and my partner, you know, we've had our challenges and what have you. And when I started sort of you know, looking at what was going on, I was like, why are we bickering at each other here? Why this is I don't care about the bloody bins. Why are we arguing about what need is not being met in me or in him, or you know, what's going on? And when we broke it down and actually discussed it, we realized both our inner childs were being triggered. You know, what we didn't get from our parents.
Mm.
And we were looking from it from our intimate relationship. We were looking from it into from our relationship to say, right, I need this from you. But I didn't communicate that. I didn't say, this is what I need you to do. Equally, he didn't communicate because we didn't know. We hadn't sat down and thought
The
about
great
it.
unsaid, I call it. The great
The
unsaid.
great unsaid, you know, and it
Yeah.
comes out in all these ugly ways where you're bickering about all sorts of nonsense. And it's nothing to do with that. It's a basic need that has not been met either in childhood from your parents, and you're looking to fix that in a relationship. But if you do not acknowledge that and become aware of it, it will keep playing out, and it will play out in all your relationships, in the workplace, in your friendships, everything, until you acknowledge it. But the greatest thing, what I was going to say, you know, we've talked a lot about, you know, relationships drifting away, but the what is so lovely and beautiful when you do speak your truth
Mm.
and you are able to say to your friend, colleague, family member, loved one, say, okay, this is what's happening here. This is what I
For me,
experience
for
when I
me.
hear you
Yeah.
say that. This is what I feel. I don't know if that's your intention, but this is how I've received it. And you often find that the other person is going, oh my God, that is totally not what I meant, you know. But when you work through that and have that really honest conversation and you work through that conflict, the strength that comes in your relationship after that is
Off the
incredible.
scale.
You just feel like you've moved on to a whole different level. It's fantastic.
That's conscious. That's conscious. What I would call conscious, authentic relationship,
Yeah,
which means the number one thing, and usually this comes up for me, Susie, I don't know about you, in early sort of sessions with clients. One of the big things I roll out all the time is, what we say isn't necessarily what the other person hears, and vice versa.
mm,
And that is a really important thing. What we say isn't what the other person hears, which is what you were
yeah,
saying then. And someone called Kim Scott came out with a brilliant concept, which I've used ever since 6 years ago. And it was the concept called radical candor. And radical candor
mm,
is, because us British are so bad at not saying what the real great unsaid is, we
yeah,
are world class at being bad at not expressing our emotions. Radical candor is it found a middle way. And if it was around at the time of Maslow, I'm sure Maslow would have kind of adopted this. So Radical Candor by Kim Scott, there's a book, but you can watch videos on it as well. It's really good.
yeah,
Radical Candor is, you challenge directly, but you care for the person personally.
yeah,
Because if you can manage to navigate that razor's edge between the two, so you still got to challenge the point directly, but do it in a way that shows that you care about the relationship and the person, which is why you're bringing it up. Now, the counter to that, which most of us have been guilty of, the consequence is that we didn't say something the first time or the 10th time or the
Yeah.
100th time.
Yeah.
So on the 101th time, it might be something to do with, I don't know, your partner's left his toilet seat up. And it's like, right, I'm really going to launch, right? No, it's never, I've always said, it's never about the toilet seat.
No,
It's the
never read the
100
bin.
things that with the bins and
It's the
disrespect
compound
or,
effect of all the times you didn't say
yeah,
when it was you
when
should
it
have been
needed to be
addressed.
said on a
Yeah.
one. So you wait until it's a 10 flashing red
Yeah.
light, and then it all goes up like a volcano. So, we've got to. Now, I've been doing this for a number of years now. It works for every client. I would suggest that everyone that was watching this tries it out and learns the practice, because it's probably, for us British, one of the biggest lessons we have to learn is radical candor.
Yeah. So what does I love the concept of radical candor. I think, yes, I think if we all embraced this, it would dramatically improve our relationships. But what does that look like in practical levels? Because I could imagine trying to introduce, if you've never been that person where you've openly just voiced what was going on, you might have some kind of clumsy errors to begin with. It might be, and the other person be like, what's gotten to you? Or you're aggressive, or, kind of they would receive it quite, it would be quite challenging, cause a lot of conflict.
So the number one thing is to realize that it's gonna feel uncomfortable.
Mm.
It's not something that
Can't get away from it, can we?
right. It's going to be emotional, right? It's going to be uncomfortable. Now, the best way, I mean, obviously, I work with this with clients all the time. I try to get better and better in my own life, because obviously we want to apply it in our own lives, not just talk to our clients about what works and what doesn't. So what tends to work a lot, and you've got to find your own way. There's several different avenues into this, but it might be along the lines of, right, this isn't work. You're talking to your friend at work, you're talking to your boss, you're talking to someone, neighbor, you're talking to your partner, a family member. This isn't working for me anymore. And you keep, as calm as possible. Remember, challenge the thing directly, but care personally. So don't have a barb in, laced through your language, because tone is equal to the language of what you say. So this isn't working for me anymore. This is what you're doing is making me feel like such and such. And this is why it's really aggravating me. Like you were talking about earlier with the bins with Dave, you're in your relationship and the rest of it, it's about your inner child stuff. A lot of this will be inner child stuff that we've never resolved or healed. So,
I think I would probably be inclined to say, I feel like this rather than you're making me feel, because that seems probably more attacking. It's like the blame is going on them.
No, the blame, put the blame on yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's
it's
the
our
other
stuff, isn't it?
Remember, you're trying to point out the behavior and not the person isn't good enough. Because the minute you go for the person, you're going to trigger all sorts of stuff in them from the past, recent, distant past. So it's about the behavior that's not working for you, not the person. So this, and give the why. We all like, the brain likes to know when there's a question and there's a query and curiosity, the brain likes to know the why. So give the why. Now, what tends to happen when it doesn't work is that, we end up getting so wound up over a couple of weeks with not saying something. And then suddenly one more thing happens and we explode. And we go back to that thing that you did 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, 2 years ago. Well, the other person can't even remember it because you never made a point of it and brought it up. So the secret is catch it early when it's on a 1 or a 2 or a 3, and it's just starting to get mildly irritating and it's really starting to just dig in a little bit. It's worthy of mentioning. Catch it on a 1, 2, or 3, because if you leave it until it's a 7, 8, 9 flashing red 10,
you're a volcano erupting, aren't you?
The volcano cracks. But what happens is that you switch off the logical, when your emotions take over you, we call it red mist, don't we? When the emotions take over you, you can't even articulate and make sense in an audible way what you're really trying to say. So you sound like you're, this madman or mad woman who's just trying to get a frenzied kind of emotion out. Well, that is the consequences if you haven't dealt with it weeks or months before when you needed to confront it. So, when you've got the courage and you've got the articulate, very calm way of doing it, that's when you get radical candor out. And you've got to remember the second part, the care personally bit, because if you make it a direct attack, the other person's defensive. What do we all do when we get attacked? We put the defenses and we don't listen.
Yeah. Shut
and
down.
We don't listen.
And then we go on the attack and go, well, you did this and you did that. And then it all.
And it's a ping pong.
Yeah.
It's a ping pong game.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because you're saying catch it on the 1, 2, and 3. The problem is if we're not being conscious and not having this level of self-awareness about us each and every day, practicing that regularly, then we may miss the 1, 2, and 3. We'll experience that irk, that annoyance, that irritation. But if we don't pause to kind of go, like we've said before, the body is always giving us signs and signals. It's an alarm saying, hello, I need some attention here, address this. So if you miss those, if you feel the annoyance and just move on, do something else and don't address it, don't stop to think, go, okay, why do I feel annoyed? Why do I feel upset? What's happened? What boundary has been crossed? What value has been trodden all over? What need hasn't been met? If you don't stop you will get to stage 10 and then you will. So again, it's just creating that awareness.
That mind gap. Call it. Between
and pausing. And journaling again comes into this, if you're like, why did I feel annoyed by that person? Writing it down will feel so insightful, and because all sorts will come out that just you didn't even know was in there. I cannot advocate it enough. It's so
I call it the whispers. It's going to give you the whisper. What the body does when you like you brilliantly just said, when you create the mind space, the reflection time to pause back between what you think and feel and what you're going to say and do. That's what the whole thing is, creating a chasm so that you don't instantly think, feel, rage, go for it, say things that you're going to regret later. The goal is to create a mind gap. And the way you do that is to practice going inward and listening to your emotions. Thoughts will give you some idea, but feelings will really give you the truth. The feelings will give you the truth of what is going on for me inside of me now and why. Get that down in your journal, and then that's going to give you what I would call the whispers of the truth of what is really going on under the surface.
But it also gives you the absolute insight and what you need to articulate and what is going on for you and why you are reacting the way that you are, why you feel the way that you are, and why this is a problem if this boundary or this action keeps continuing, and how it's causing, conflict to the relationship. One of the things I want to pick up on is where you earlier on you were saying about what are you saying yes to that you want to say no to. And this is something we actually teach in the stress management workshops that I deliver. And it's called Yes Stress. And when we say yes to things it's often we're dealing with the workplace situation and your boss comes and says, can you do this? And you've already got A, B, C, D to do. You're trying to get finished at 6 o'clock so you can get home to your family or whatever activity, what you need to do. And you know that actually, if I say yes to that and take that on, then that's going to make me have to work late and, I don't get paid for that. And then there's all these resentment comes up, this anger, this, all the rest of it. So we talk about yes stress a lot in the workshops that I deliver. And we talk about how no seems to be the hardest word to say. We really struggle with this. It's like 2 initials, 2 letters, and we struggle with this tiny little word. So we come up with this it's called the negotiate. So instead of it being no, which sounds like you're being, if you're saying no to your
Rejection
boss,
sounds like rejection.
it's rejection. It absolutely
Yeah.
sounds like you're being difficult. You're not being a team player. You're being, you're just being obstinate. You're being challenging. You're not playing the role basically. And this doesn't just apply in the workplace. This can be in families as well. And it's a great tool to use. So instead of saying no, NO stands for negotiation opportunity.
Mm.
And you basically say to the person, say, okay, this is what I'm currently dealing with. I'm doing this, and doing that, and I need to finish this by, whatever time, 6 p.m. What would you like me to drop so that I can take on what you're asking me to do? So you're showing that you want to be helpful, that you're willing to be helpful, you're willing to do it, but you're actually also expressing, say, this is my capacity, this is what I'm already dealing with. So something's got to go.
Mm.
And therefore, it's an adult conversation about it makes the other person aware of what you're dealing with and what you've got on your plate. And they kind of go, okay, you're not the right person for it. Let me get somebody else. Or they say, actually, that's not priority right now. This is taking priority. So you can have that
It's a renegotiation, yeah.
renegotiation. So a negotiate. So instead of saying no, negotiation opportunity. And I tell this to everybody to apply it in all areas of their life, the home life, the friendships,
Good.
and what have you. And word it in a way that doesn't sound, so work speak, but word it in a way that allows you to kind of say, well, have that adult conversation and see how your relationships transform. And again, if you find somebody responding, well, I don't care, I want you to do this, and you're just going to have to do it, and blah, blah, then you know that you're in a toxic relationship. And then, of course, that forces you going to have to address that. And that's a whole different conversation for another
I
day.
like that. I really like that. And thank you for sharing that. And another way is a middle ground, which is what we would teach clients, and I do for myself, is that rather than saying a yes or a no, is just say, can I come back to you on that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I
Pause.
come
Give
back to you on that?
yourself time. Yeah.
Give yourself time to go away and ponder it, because we make so many rash decisions on the moment through the
Yeah.
pressure, that pressure of being a good boy, being the
Yeah.
good girl, conditioning,
Yeah.
that if you learn, if you do struggle with no, go for the middle ground. Can I come back to you on that? And probably you'll find that over half the things that you used to say just instantly, automatically, yes to, you might end up saying no to once you've given it a bit of time to reflect.
Yeah. We called this session the tyranny of being nice. Why is it that we feel that we have to be nice to people? Why? I mean, I'm not calling that we should go out there and be rude to all the rest of it, but why do we feel it's okay to sacrifice our own needs to meet somebody else's?
I think through conditioning, because of the
Yeah.
way we've been brought up and because of society, that if we aren't that good little wife, husband, worker, neighbor, partner, if we're not people pleasing and putting other people's first,
Mm.
Catholicism is riddled with this, stand back,
A
put
lot of
everyone else
religions
first.
are, but I
Most
mean, a lot of
religions.
religions do good stuff as well. They teach very good core values. However, they're
However,
riddled with guilt as well if we don't
riddled with
comply with
guilt,
them.
we're even born into sin. And so that people pleasing bit is ingrained in us. It's not just
Mm.
ingrained us from our family, generational, but
Yeah.
also culture.
So we're
So
parented, yeah.
yeah, so we're fighting, a tsunami that's coming the other way. So, don't forget when we didn't comply and we didn't sort of do what we were told, we were ostracized and kicked out of the
Yeah.
the tribe,
Yeah.
hundreds, thousands of years ago.
And our
So
survival depends on us being in the tribe.
it's talking to that part of the brain that says, you have to be part of it, feel connected, otherwise you're going to be ostracized and put out there. So we don't need to go into the kind of psychotherapy and that of it now, because it's so deep and so entwined within our culture of how we've grown
But
up. But
we know how uncomfortable it feels to be rejected.
it's uncomfortable for many reasons than we could articulate here, of not feeling enough. It always comes back to the same thing. If I don't say yes, I'll be ostracized. I won't feel belonging or connected, and I will not feel worthy. And which is why it's so easy to go click straight into that people pleasing.
Yeah. It's such a big topic, and we could talk for hours more on it, but I know we need to end there. We need to go. Um, what I would advise, advocate, go out there and practice. And like you said, the levels 1, 2, and 3, journal about what you're tolerating, what you're putting up with, where you're saying yes when you want to say no, and get to know yourself, develop that relationship with yourself first, because that will have the ripple effect for all your relationships and transform those. And be prepared that some relationships will fall by the wayside, but you will feel so much better for having empowering relationships around you rather than toxic relationships. So, as uncomfortable as the messy middle stage is, it will be more beneficial in the long run. So,
And do your basics. Do your
do your
basics, which
basics, yeah, get
are
your
know
solid
your
foundation.
boundaries. Know your boundaries. Know
Know your
where
boundaries.
you're not being congruent with what you say you are or think
Yeah,
you are and what you do and how you show up in the world. Know where you're not expressing your emotions. Know your standards, your values. These are all things that we take for granted, but so few of us actually know it.
yeah. Well, we're going to be doing some more coaching weeks on values coming up later on in the year. So, yeah, watch out for that and help you develop your values so that you can establish those boundaries. But thank you once again, Will. Another fantastic session. We'll be back again on day 4, and we're going to be looking at esteem, which covers respect, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. So, another great topic to cover. But love to know your reflections. What have you discovered about yourself? What do you need to go and do? Share in the group, share in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are, your feedbacks, and what action you're going to take as a result. What are your takeaways from today? So, love to you all. Take care, and thanks again, Will.
See you on day 4. Thanks,
See
Susie.
you then. Bye.